checking his Instagram account.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Come on.
He's like, look how many friends I got.
Snapchat.
Yeah. He's posting shirtless photos.
What's the first social media that there ever was? What was that one?
There was one called Friendster.
And there was another. What was the
And
one
then
after
MySpace.
that?
MySpace.
MySpace. That's the one I remember.
I still have a MySpace account.
Never on it.
How to access
I
it.
wouldn't even know how to get on that thing.
Yeah,
we just had that conversation the other day.
All right.
I think that's the biggest
Here we
bully
go.
pulpit there is.
All
Facebook.
rise.
Would be awesome.
Welcome to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith.
Hi, Michael.
Scott, how are you? It's good to have you back.
It's good to be back.
You were out of town last week, and I think that we should go ahead and say you were out of town for trial, not on vacation, and you came back with a successful verdict. Very successful verdict, right?
Correct.
But it leads us into today's topic, which is perfect because a couple weeks ago when we had this conversation, you wanted to talk about bullying, which you hear me pronounce as bowling for some reason. So we can touch on both, but I think we should emphasize bullying today.
Okay.
So the case that you just dealt with it's a matter of public record, but it was a bullying case. And so you went through the trial. You said it lasted 4 days, right? 3 or 4 days?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.
So I didn't take it personally. We didn't hear from you. I figured that you were in court. But bullying is a big deal. I don't know how much you can talk about the topic of that trial. Not that you have to get into the details. But again, this was a massive case here locally. And you handled it. Can you kind of touch on a little bit of it?
Well, I can't talk a little bit about it. It was public record. If you sat in the courtroom, you would have heard all the evidence, and you would have heard the verdict from the jury in my client's favor. But boiled down to its essence, it was a bullying case. And my client was injured due to a group of young men and boys who chose to torment and to tease and to eventually seriously hurt my client, who is now permanently injured as a result, both physically and psychologically.
Well, we see a lot of this, especially these school shootings, and we've touched on this before. It's kind of like that outlier in society is the way we're looking at it. They have mental issues, whatever. A lot of times it's just somebody who's been pushed to the edge, and I think we have to talk about the subject of bullying because it seems like it comes up in the mainstream media all the time. You're seeing a lot of it on Facebook where people are just abusing people back and forth, and it just seems to come out of nowhere. You've got a lot of keyboard tough guys that are doing this, but when it hits close to home, it can affect someone's life for the rest of their life.
Oh my gosh. You just hit on a phrase, keyboard. What'd you call it?
Keyboard tough guys. I'm not sure how everybody else says it, but
I
when
like
you're behind that screen, you can say anything you want. Actually, it just happened to me personally last week. Something that we made for a client and shared, and then it was like someone was attacking us. I'm like, that's an advertising thing. Like we paid for that. We made it, but it's more like a personal attack on me. So I just chose to kind of ignore it. But I'm 40-some years old, so it's not a big deal. When you're younger, it's leading people to make really poor decisions.
Well, Michael, when I was growing up, and probably somewhat when you were growing up, even though you're so much younger than me, the bullying came through confrontation, physical confrontation, name-calling, and physical assault. Accosting people. People going up to other people, pushing them, calling them names, making them feel bad about themselves, belittling them. And,
did you feel like that was bullying? Like, I know that the definition of bullying is using superior strength or influence to intimidate to get the outcome that person wants. That's the definition of it. I didn't look at it as bullying. I looked at it as more like picking on someone. But
well, I think there's a line, and that's the defense. Oh, we were just teasing. Oh, we didn't mean it. Oh, that's the defense that they fall back on. I think back when I was growing up, it crossed the line of teasing when you're punching a little kid.
Right.
When you're calling a girl names because you don't like the shoes she wears to school. Those kind of things become mean and mean-spirited and done in ill will. With malice, if you will. That type of thing happened growing up. And in my era, you'd come home, if you ever came home and complained about it, your your father would tell you, well, stand up to the bully
Right.
and give it right back. And that isn't really probably the only way to treat it, and probably not the best way to treat it, but the law treats it a bit differently. But growing up, it's hard to divorce ourselves from society and how society looks at what you should or should not do. For some reason, it seems like kids now are more sensitive than they were when I was growing up.
Well, I think it's because they have that parent that doesn't, and I'm not picking on parenting. I mean, I'm a parent, and I want my kid to turn the other cheek or go talk to the teacher, but I have also instructed, like, hey, if it's going too badly, choke them out. That's probably not the way to go.
No,
not when you have a little girl, but I think the difference is in bullying when we were kids was it was looked at as more teasing, or it could cross a line. Now you're seeing violent retribution that's coming from this.
Well, you're seeing suicides resulting. Let's look at the worst result of cyberbullying. Now, it's as we move into it, it's not physical confrontation, like you said. Keyboard tough guys.
Yeah.
And that causes a lot of damage to kids as I see it. I mean, I haven't experienced it. I mean, people have written me emails and have said mean things on occasion, but I don't really see it as bullying to me. But I think children, younger people, get affected because then hundreds, if not thousands, of their peers are seeing it.
Well, I think what I saw when I was doing research on this topic was there are actually a lot of statistics on, especially cyberbullying, but they say the American Department of Justice reports 1 in 4 children will be bullied in their lifetime. It doesn't define what that is, whether that's online, whether that's physical. And when you're looking at that's 25% of the population of children are going to deal with this. Where I get worried as a parent is what is the outcome of the kid that's getting bullied? What are they going to do? Because we're seeing in Florida, some kid felt he was being bullied, and he comes and shoots up a school. There are varying degrees of this bullying, but I don't think anyone's looking at the person being bullied as the victim. They're waiting until that outburst from that person, and they're saying they're the bully. Something had to provoke that.
Something had to provoke the bullying?
Yeah, something, it's not like the Vegas shooting where no one knows what's going on. The kid that shot up the school in Parkland, they said he was being bullied by other kids. And this was his retribution, was he had warned people he was going to do what he did. And people just ostracized him anyway. I'm not saying I feel for that kid and what he did. I'm just saying the amount of bullying that's going on between kids, it seems like the reason I said keyboard tough guy is we can exchange text messages, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it is, MySpace if you want to do that. We can attack people in so many different ways, but it's not face-to-face anymore. And that's why I think this bullying goes too far. There's not really a chicken switch to kind of stop it. So in the instance of your case, that thing escalated, but at least they were all in the same place. They might have been picking on that kid beforehand.
Bullying comes in different forms, and I believe the law doesn't see it like society sees it. The law is pretty cut and dry. There have been jurisdictions that have created laws strictly for bullying, but not all do. And the law is pretty well set in place that it establishes when the line is crossed. And it has to result in some type of injury, whether psychological or physical. But in society, you touch on a point. When I indicated to you, I thought our society, our children now are more sensitive than they used to be. And you mentioned something about parental skills or maybe the way kids are brought up. I don't know about that. I'm not here to speak about that. But it seems to be more and more children, and if your statistics are correct, that 1 in 4 are going to be bullied. I'm not sure it's different than it was when I was growing up. I think how kids react to it is different now. But with social media, it changes everything, and I can't tell you from sitting here what the increase is, if any. I can just deal with it when it reaches the point that someone has violated the law. Someone was negligent, which means they didn't use reasonable care. And their lack of reasonable care when they had a duty to use reasonable care when breached causes an injury. Now you've got the law involved.
Is that so? the case that you just brought to verdict and won is there was a conclusion of violence was committed, so that's easier for you to look at and say that's pretty cut and dry. Have you dealt with a lot of bullying cases? I mean, if you really look at it like the Me Too movement, that can also be looked at as bullying, right? In-office bullying of people.
Well, maybe it's a response to bullying. Maybe that's what you're saying. Maybe we're saying the same thing. Yeah, response to bullying in Hollywood. Apparently, people of power there knew they were in power, knew that people wanted to be successful in their careers in Hollywood, to become actors, to get parts. And they apparently used their power to control who was chosen as an actor and who was not, to bully, to manipulate women, I think, for the most part, but men weren't immune. That's probably a form of bullying.
How does that come to your office? So say you're going to try that case. I mean, proving bullying would be, saving emails, text messages, that. I mean, this is not a new thing, but it seems like there are more cases coming to trial, at least if you're reading things in the media. Bill Cosby he's on trial again, and there was a lady that was protesting outside that was a former actress that said, this happened to her and her friends. The Me Too movement has kind of pushed more of these people. It's not just sexual harassment, but it is bullying you into doing things, right?
Yeah, it's a manipulation from a position of power or authority, at least perceived position of power and authority.
But how do you build a case on that? Like, if you were to start from scratch, if someone says I'm being bullied or harassed, they have to provide some kind of documentation, right?
Well, it's going to come. Evidence comes in many different forms. If it's cyberbullying, it's going to come through social media posts, whether it comes through emails, however it may come. You would accumulate the evidence. Maybe people talking to each other, but not every bullying situation is a cause of action in the law. It's not, and that's what I was just trying to say. From the simplest point, you bring a cause of action because someone had a duty, breached that duty, and caused an injury. That's really that simple. That's negligence. Negligence is using reasonable care not to injure someone else. Well, that's a pretty broad brush. And just simply what I just told you, you go, I understand those words, I know what that means. But applying it to how the courts then interpret a set of facts puts a lawyer in a position of determining whether or not there's an actual case to pursue. Parents can be very upset that their child is crying every day and is depressed, and all of those things are probably true, but is it the result of bullying, and can you prove that a person who had a duty breached that duty and actually caused the depression, the injury that the parents are claiming? And bullying doesn't have to be just children, as you just mentioned on the Me Too movement, where the Harvey Weinsteins of the world are accused of manipulating their power to get sexual favors from up-and-coming actors. That's a form of bullying. It could lead to cause of action. It could lead to criminal conduct in some instances. In the case that I just had, there's a piece of civil action involved. In other words, we brought a lawsuit against individuals. We claimed that they were negligent, that they had a duty, they breached that duty, and it caused injury, because there was physical injury and there was psychological injury. And it went beyond negligence, went to recklessness, a substantial disregard for the safety of others. And it went from tormenting, teasing, chasing to actual physical injury. So it had an element of two kinds of injury. But again, the law was in place long before this bullying issue has become so popular to discuss and has become so much of a stigma on our society that kids are committing suicide at an alarming rate.
Well, that's the part that I worry about the most, is that it seems that the mental state of these kids that are getting bullied, it's almost like there's nowhere to turn. And I think it's kind of, you see someone, like on Facebook, every time that they report someone else was bullied and they took their own life, it seems like there's kind of like a copycat thing. Like, that's the answer. That's the only thing about social media that I think is, I won't say the only thing, probably giving your data away to whoever is probably the worst thing. But the suicide rate, that if you're looking at it, a kid's going to say, oh, that's an option, that's a way out because I can't take this bullying anymore.
Well, I don't know how they're going to do this. They're going to regulate or over-regulate social media, but it may come to a point where they're going to start prohibiting certain comments made on social media, almost like regulating cigarettes. Mm-hmm. You've got to be a certain age because young kids are not responsible. Young kids can be mean-spirited. They may have not learned what they can say and what they can't say and the consequences of that. And when you're reaching thousands of people by putting something irresponsibly on the internet, as a child, maybe you shouldn't be putting anything on the internet. Right. Maybe you shouldn't be posting things. Maybe it shouldn't be permitted. I don't know. I'm not saying that's true, but that's the direction I see it going.
I just see that in your profession, to me, what I see is there's going to be a lot more activity about this, which is going to reach your level because you are there to get justice for somebody. I mean, I know we say that and that's the name of the show, but you're there to take care of somebody who has been irreparably harmed, right? So this is a case where somebody mentally, you could break them down. If they're a youth and they can't handle it, that changes the course of your life, right? It is on you to be there to protect these people. And that's why I think there's going to be more of these cases coming.
Yeah, you made a point earlier. There's going to be more cases coming because it's getting worse before it gets better. Ever since Columbine, I mean, how many school shootings have there been? I mean, kids, I think, are hurting. They're reaching out. They are reacting. They don't know any better. They see on social media that the kids in Columbine were shot by other kids that were students at Columbine. And they think to themselves, maybe that's my only way out. Maybe that's all I've got. Maybe they're not getting good family support. And as a result of that, more and more school shootings. So is it from bullying? Probably partly. Is it because of family upbringing? Partly responsible, I'm sure. Maybe there's mental health issues that are out of the control of the parents. There's a lot of factors going into it. This isn't an easy one-step solution, no matter how you look at it. I can only address it when it comes to me as a potential case and whether or not the elements fit that we can pursue. Because a lot of these things happen, and you can't pursue them legally. You have to pursue them in other ways.
Right. Let's stop there because we got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to keep going on the topic of bullying because I've got something that I want to get your opinion on. Right now, you're listening to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith. I want to ask the question. If you... I didn't know how I was going to say that. Is that cool?
Well, yes.
Okay. I want to... Well, that shows the severity of the case.
Well, let's just get back into it, and you can ask me the questions you want to ask.
Okay. Well,
okay,
sure. All right,
we good?
Jimmy. Yep.
Yeah, I was bullied nonstop from 3rd grade through 7th grade before I started fighting back, and there was a point. I'm glad, honest to God, I'm being honest here, I'm glad my parents did not have a gun in the house. There were times when I wanted to take a gun to school and I wanted to kill, well, one particular student. He was 3 years older than everybody else, and he was bullying everyone, beating the crap out of everyone.
His name was Archie Griffin.
No, his name was Jeff Reuter. And what I found out later, years later, and when I was in college, I read about it in the Upper Arlington News, and I found out from some friends of mine who lived nearby him, his dad beat the snot out of him every single day, and his mother was an alcoholic who was abusing prescription medication. I'm thinking, God, not that that's an excuse, but no wonder he came to school with a bunch of pent-up rage. Mm-hmm. No wonder he was abusive against me and other kids. And I just told my parents once, they took me to see a psychologist in 6th grade because they thought something was wrong with me. I'm like, no, nothing's wrong with me. And the other kids in school were just getting the snot kicked out of us by some kid who's 3 years older than us. He hit puberties and, in our grade. And he hit puberty. You. Yeah, like he had a driver's license in junior high school, for crying out loud.
I'd have got a ride from him. Jimmy, will you bring
Then he ended up in prison. Yep. Ready to roll?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. I just had to get that out.
I'm glad you did.
That.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
From what you said, mental health issues, upbringing, bullying. Yeah, it's not an easy fix. Certainly. Okay, here we go. Welcome back to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith.
That's the best opening in the business right there. You can't beat that. All the money that we pay for that. Scott, I want to get right back into this. In case you're just joining us, we were talking we're free.
I'm going to start charging.
When we were opening the show, we were talking about the fact that you had just finished, you got a verdict And the verdict was for $1.25 million, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
So this wasn't like a little nitpicky deal. This was a big case, actionable case here in Columbus. And I'm not saying the number to say, what a great guy you are and all that. And you are a good guy. But it is the severity of this. How this thing got out of control. The bullying kept going nonstop, and it caused physical harm where somebody, for the rest of their life, has to be taken care of based on this money, right?
Well, yeah, this is very serious, and it's serious to any parent or child who has to go through with it. No matter a degree that you're talking about, whether it's physical, psychological, or both. This is a big deal. My young client carried this with him. This happened in 2012, and we just had the verdict on Friday. 6 years later, I mean, this kid's carried it with him, man. It's a burden, and it was tough on him, very tough on him, and the jury understood it, thankfully. They understood what he went through and what happened to him. And there are people to be held responsible. We're to be accountable for our actions. And these young men, some agreed to be held accountable and some didn't. But it's all pushed by insurance, Michael. We talk about that all the time. This case should have been resolved years ago. But the insurance companies get in between and they decide if it's going to get resolved. And they put up the position they're going to defend this. And it's indefensible. My case was indefensible.
But they have to do it, right?
Insurance companies, they don't have to do it. What they're supposed to do is reasonably evaluate the negligence, the duty, the breach, the proximate cause, and the damages, and the risk of going before a jury to settle it for a reasonable amount. That's how it should work. But insurance companies get real arrogant, and insurance companies think they know more than you, and they think they know more than juries, and they think they know more than courts. So they run their little defense attorneys around and tell them what to do, and they take very unreasonable positions. And this verdict is a prime example of insurance companies getting in the way of this matter being resolved a long time ago for a reasonable amount. Chose not to do it. And everybody suffers, but the bean counters up in the boardrooms of these insurance companies who just laugh it off because they have so much money and they don't care about the people, they care about the bottom line.
Well, I mean, in this instance,
that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's just one person's
I could be
opinion.
wrong.
Yeah, but you have dealt with this issue for over 30 years, right? So this is not new to you, but I think there are people out there who don't realize if you don't have someone who has your best interest, who has dealt with this and actually been in a courtroom versus just settling cases. I mean, I'm sure that family could have come to a settlement at some point in 2012 to 2014. What I'm curious about is you fought for them. What was their reaction when it was over? I mean, they finally got resolution.
Oh, it was emotional.
But it was emotional for you too, right?
Everybody.
Because you're in the fight.
Everybody was.
Like, it's got to feel good.
That felt great. You finally beat the bully in the courtroom, which is the insurance company.
Which is also what this show is about today.
Insurance companies are bullies. I've said it for years. In my opinion, they're bullies. They push you around because they've got this superior financial support. And they have so much influence in the community. They have so much power that they have money to support candidates who run for office and get elected, and judges who get elected. And it's unfortunate because the scales of justice are supposed to be even. Lady Justice is blind. You've seen the statue?
Mm-hmm.
They show Lady Justice holding scales, and there's a blindfold on her. It's blind because justice is not supposed to look at whether the defendant is a big insurance company or whether the plaintiff is just a sole individual. It should be applicable equally, evenly, reasonably across the board, regardless on whose side of the case you're on. It's not in reality. We all know that.
Right.
And until people start getting tired of being pushed around by the Harvey Weinsteins, by the insurance companies, you're going to continue to get pushed around. I'm like Jim was, as he mentioned just earlier.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if people heard that during the break. Jim, who produces this show and every other show that we do, he was bullied in school and was telling us about that. And Jim, how old are you?
55, almost 55. And I was bullied in elementary school back in the 70s, and I finally fought back in 7th grade in junior high school. I'm glad I did because the bullies left me alone.
And to say that Jim barely looks 65, I think that's good. But again, this is a real life example that we wouldn't have known about had we were just having this discussion. So it's happened. If you're looking at your 1 and 4, there are 4 people sitting in this room, and one person has gone through it. So again, but it had long-term effects on Jim.
Oh yeah, I've gone through it. I mean, most people have gone through it at some point in their life. You may not because you're so big and strong and
handsome.
and
Just say
handsome too. Yeah, and handsome too. Mostly handsome.
But you know, that's the part where I look at it and I say, you know, I went to high school with the guy that was the freeway sniper. That's not something that you put on a resume and you get a job, but he wasn't a guy that was bullied. But he had mental issues, right?
Well, that's a completely different ballgame.
Right, but again, when people think he was doing that to be mean, he wasn't. He just had mental issues. When you have people that... He wasn't a guy that would bully anybody either. That's the part where I'm looking at all these people that they could have had bad outcomes because they've been bullied. Somehow they mentally pushed through it, but today's world is a lot meaner, in my opinion. You have social media, people can pick on you. Schools don't seem to do that much. I mean, they have lockdown drills, but they don't really have like, hey, if you're bullied, you can go see this one person, right? So when that happens, you've got to have somebody that is experienced with this. That's why when you first brought this up, I thought, man, that's going to be a tough case. Like, you got a great verdict, and congratulations on that, but that family has to feel amazing.
Oh, they
because
do.
That torture from 2012 until last week, it's
closure.
Yeah.
Because everybody was on them. The insurance companies, the defense attorneys, even the court was not looking favorably on this. Well, it is what it is, Michael. It is what it is. And someone has to step up. I mean, Jim talked about his instance. He stood up in 7th grade. My dad was the kind of guy that said, he hit you, hit him back. Well, Dad, he's a foot taller than him. I don't care. Well, I mean, we do that now in the law figuratively. I hit back. I'm going to protect my clients.
Well, again, it is a topic that is going on every single day, especially wherever you look. There always seems to be something else. And it's not just the school shootings, it's the Me Too movement. But it's just interesting that your chosen occupation is going to see a lot more of this. I mean, I think that...
the society as a whole needs to get a hold of this. This is a nationwide societal issue. I mean, the law can do so much until they pass the laws, and then enforcing those laws is a different ballgame. But this is something that society has to deal with. Families have to deal with. Schools have to deal with. Way before, and probably more importantly than just the law dealing with it.
And Scott Elliot Smith will definitely take care of you if you need him on that case. I'm just asking. I'm asking for a friend.
Of course.
Jim, I think we've got a case. That's going to be it for this week, unless you have any parting words of wisdom.
Stand up to the bullies.
All right. I think we should send him home with the line that Jimmy does so well. Jimmy?
You've been listening to Get Justice with Scott Elliot Smith.
Jim, you're part of it today. Good job.
Is your brother Chip?
Low power,